All right, good. I am really looking forward to sharing this. This is a conversation that I've been wanting to have for a very long time about the economy. I've had it in a couple of different ways over time, but I'm putting it together today in a new way. So this has been a very interesting, maybe unconsciously deliberate, provocative title for a webinar. I definitely don't usually go for provocative factor. That's not part of my design at all. Um, but I wanted to get people's attention because I think we are at a crisis point, if you will, in terms of exploring what's next in the economy. And I wanted us to start engaging or continue to engage in an exploratory conversation around what's up in the economy and how do we need to re-engineer it, because we do need to re-engineer it big time in order for us to create in response to need and not out of greed. So, all right, I've got a lot of stuff to cover today, so I'm eager to get us started and start sharing the information so that we can get rolling. All right, so we're going to have a conversation today, first of all, about history. We'll start with this title slide. Capitalism isn't the problem. And don't send me hate mail because of this. I promise we're all on the same page in a heated agreement. We're going to be talking about the future of our economy and some things we need to consider if we're going to build an equitable, just, abundant, and sustainable world. And of course, we have to start with a conversation about money, which in and of itself is actually not the root of evil, but it certainly has been used in a way that has not supported the fulfillment of the potential of money, nor the fulfillment of the potential of the human story. So let's start unpacking our relationship with money, our relationship with business, our relationship with what we think of as capitalism. We're gonna send some healing love to Adam Smith, who is credited as being the creator of capitalism as a concept. It's actually Adam Smith and Karl Marx, which is sort of interesting there in and of itself. And we're going to explore reframing some of these ideas and putting them into a more modern / evolutionary / human design perspective. So let's start first and talk about money, the economy, and evolution. So some of you may have heard this before, but it always bears repeating because every time I teach it, I hear it in a different way. I actually was interviewing Dr. Amit Goswami this morning and Dr. Valentina Onisor about their new book called The Quantum Brain, which I highly recommend. Great book that explains the function of the brain and how it is that the brain translates the quantum field into our perceived human experience. So as I go through this, I'm always rethinking it from different perspectives. So even if you've heard it before, I want to invite you to sit back and think about it, what I'm going to say. And I really want you to think about this in the context of business. And I really want you to think about this in the context of consciousness, because what we experience in the material world is really an artifact of the evolution of consciousness. Even the changes or the manifestations of the human design body graph is just an outpicturing of consciousness and the way in which our individual and our collective human story engages with the quantum field. So we're going to start today by remembering that Newtonian physics, which was actually information about how the material world works, that was created at the end of the scientific revolution. So Sir Isaac Newton was actually kind of the last of the scientists of the scientific revolution. So for whatever reason, he gets credit for materialism, even though there were actually a lot of other scientists before Sir Isaac Newton who did a lot of work of interpreting the mysterious ethers of our planet and translating an understanding of the planet and how it works into science. But we ended the scientific revolution with Sir Isaac Newton. And what we learned from the scientific revolution and the emergence of the consciousness of materialism. So when we engage in the scientific revolution, we set out as humans in the scientific revolution to interpret our world, to banish, if you will, fear and suspicion, and to explain our world in a way that would allow us to understand more deeply the mechanics of how the world worked. So all of these scientists over hundreds of years did all of this research. And at the end, Sir Isaac Newton came up with his understanding of physics, probably the kind of physics you studied in high school if you studied physics in high school. And Sir Isaac Newton basically sort of codified and solidified the scientific revolution by helping us integrate some core concepts. Some of the core concepts that we integrated as a result of the scientific revolution included a passion and a love for finite things, like finite amounts and finite solutions. We came up with fixed laws with probable, possible, and predictable results. We fell in love with formulas and reasoning and logic. We thought we understood nature and natural law, and we became compelled to only embrace certainty as a way of thinking. Now, remember, this isn't Sir Isaac Newton's fault or Galileo or anybody else's fault. This was just how the current trend in consciousness from an evolutionary perspective was manifesting through the human story at this time. This materialistic understanding of the world got translated into not just science, but we started to apply formulas everywhere, including to the economy, including to the way in which we constructed our workforce, including how we built production lines and we created industry. And in this materialistic consciousness and way of doing business, we established material value, mostly money, material value, as the metric of success in business. Mostly money, not only money, but mostly money. Now, evolution, first of all, when we look at the cosmos, when astrophysicists look at the cosmos or quantum physicists look at the cosmos, the imperative of cosmos is to move towards complex, unified, coherent systems. And we, as elements or aspects of consciousness, which is really what we are as human beings, we're holographic representations of consciousness in little human bodies being operated by brains that are really, really good at translating the idea that we are somehow separated from everybody else because we have skin in these bodies. And we don't realize that as we create and move through the world, we're A, unified, B, evolving towards greater states of complexity, and C, designed to be living coherently, meaning we're designed to be creating from a place of abundance, love, and sufficiency and expansion, which is actually kind of how the cosmos works. So evolution is the imperative of consciousness and is possibly, probably, definitely, if you ask any evolutionary biologist, a little bit more deliberate than what we were taught in school. Probably the most deleterious thought, the most dangerous thought that came out of not so much the scientific revolution a little bit later, but sort of fit right in with material consciousness, was the interpretation of Darwin's work. And let me be really clear, Darwin didn't really even stand behind this, so let's not blame Darwin either. But the interpretation of Darwin's work and sewing up the entire body of his observations in the pat little phrase that says, survival of the fittest, right, is the way in which we evolve. We now know, evolutionary biology now knows pretty clearly, that's not true. That's not true. So let's be really clear that survival of the fittest and Darwinian evolution really doesn't hold up to water, and you probably will have to look very hard to find a good evolutionary biologist of any repute who will defend Darwinian evolution. So we are in the midst of a giant surge forward in the evolution of consciousness. This emergence of a new way of thinking, a new way of creating, a new manifestation of consciousness was heralded by what I call the quantum era. And at the beginning of the quantum era, we found scientists who were willing to go to a deeper level because now the equipment had evolved and look at the building blocks of matter and interpret the way quantum particles behaved and recognized very quickly, very early on, that the building blocks of matter don't behave the way that matter does. So consequently, maybe the way in which we think matter operates doesn't necessarily make sense, and basically stood everything that we think about how the world works on its head. And we're still trying to figure all of this out. We're still trying to figure all of this out. And it's a very, this phase of our consciousness is still emerging, and we're knee deep in the thick of it right now. This quantum era heralded a shift in consciousness and a shift in the way in which we think. So if we go back and we look at quantum physics kind of starting in the late 1980s, 1890s, definitely not in the 1980s, right? That was just bad hair. Okay. So, and then in the 1890-ish, in the mid to late 1800s, early 1900s, we saw quantum physics sort of be recognized as this official body of science. And then in hand with that, we started to see this consciousness percolate into the world. And in the 1920s, we saw the emergence of people who really started to think quantumly, if you will. We saw the beginning of the New Thought movement. We saw thought leaders like Ernest Holmes, Edgar Cayce, Madame Blavatsky a little earlier, Rudolf Steiner, Maria Montessori, many, many new thought leaders who started to embrace the idea, and many of you have heard of the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, embrace the idea that thoughts create your reality and that we are all connected by virtue of the quantum field, that we can create non-locally, meaning your energy or your thoughts or the frequency of energy you embody can impact things that you don't physically have to touch. We have lots of interesting science now that can measure that. We embraced a new way of creating called fundamental creativity. We started to measure life, not so much through the metric of money and numbers, but started to think about how can we live a life that's more rooted in the energy of well-being. And we got more and more comfortable with embracing change, uncertainty, and potential. The currency of the quantum era became not so much money and material value, but well-being. How much well-being do I have? How much well-being can I create? And as we start exploring what's going on in the economy and what do we need to shift and change so that we can build a just, equitable, sustainable, peaceful world, and our economy is an essential part of that, a thriving, living, creative part of that, we have to start looking at changing the metrics that we use around success or the currency that we use in business. So we've been using money as the metric in business and success. We are shifting now towards well-being, quality of life. And personally, I think this is a big reason why right now we have a great quitting cycle in our workforce. We see people who are leaving their jobs in record numbers because they don't want to be mistreated anymore, because they're looking for a quality of life, or they've been home with their kids for years now, thanks to COVID, and they want to keep it that way. They've discovered that maybe there are other things that they value more than the metrics of money. So in order to create well-being, we have to be well, we have to live well, and we have to share well-being with the world. And this becomes, in this modern era, this becomes the new pathway to creating success in business. And I'm going to unpack this more for you in greater depth over the next little bit. So let's talk about the shift, if you will, in these eras between the material era and the quantum era, or the materialistic economy and the quantum economy, through the lens of human design and the solar plexus mutation. So I have to start again back with the history of what's been happening. So as consciousness was evolving through the human story, the human design chart itself went through a major change in 1781. In 1781, the human design energy field split from being the 7-centered energy system to the 9-centered energy system. And this shift from 7 to 9 beings actually sets us up for another big shift that's getting ready to happen in 2027. Now, note the timing on this. So 1781. This was after the end of the scientific revolution. So all this changes in the way in which we think started, all the stuff that set us up to change the way in which we think. So let's think pre-scientific revolution. We didn't have a lot of control over our lives. We didn't have a lot of sovereignty over our destiny. We didn't really understand the way in which the world worked. So there was a lot of fear and suspicion and superstition. As the scientific revolution unfolded, we began to understand the world differently. And at the end of this shift, the chart itself changed to be able to better process these shifts and changes in consciousness that we had been experiencing through our third dimensional reality over a couple of 100 years. We're in the middle of another shift. We're actually at the tail end of a global cycle, getting ready to move into a new global cycle in 2027, meaning that we've been in the last 200 years, especially, undergoing a new surge, a new change, new work, new understandings, new scientific interpretations, and other kinds of interpretations. We've been going through a big shift that's going to show us that we're about to make big changes in the way in which we live and create in the world. So what we had emerging in this change from 7 to 9 centers, we had the emergence of, or rather a split from the heart chakra into the G and the will center, and a split in the solar plexus chakra, and we had the emergence of the spleen and the emotional solar plexus. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into all the mechanics of the shift and the changes in the chart. If you're interested in that or you want to learn more about it, I have written a book about it called The Quantum Human. You can get it on Amazon. But it's really interesting to look at, most importantly, of all these centers, one of the centers that emerged that's pretty new in the human story is the will center. The will center is the center that translates value on the material plane in its mundane definition. So we look at it, we say this a lot of times in traditional human design, it translates value on the material plane. Yes, and it's more than that. We call it sometimes in human design the ego. It's the place where the individuated aspect of the divine that is you lives in service to the higher good, to your higher self or the greater good. And we'll unpack that as we go through. So this shift in the hardwiring of the heart gave us the power to consciously calibrate the magnetic monopole, this expansion of our creative potential, and the sovereignty over our own life path is actually the root of the law of attraction. So in traditional human design, we talk about you have this magnetic force that you're born with that basically you just surrender to it and your life unfolds. You don't have a whole lot of control over it. You don't have choice over it. But actually the science doesn't bear that out. And actually what we see is as we've evolved in consciousness, we've gained more control over what we can create, the sovereignty of our life, and what we attract into our life experiences. So the idea that your thoughts create your reality is actually a big surge forward towards the evolution of quantum creativity, which is where we're headed, and a quantum economy, which is where we're headed, and the expansion of our human creative potential. So we gained personal sovereignty through willpower, right? But let's talk about that for half a second because that's important. Because willpower implies force. Willpower implies bearing down and gritting and pushing through. And actually, because we're still evolving, that willpower center is not designed to be used that way. And in fact, if we use it that way, if you have willpower defined in your chart, or if you have an open will center and you're trying to use willpower you don't have access to, the only thing that really happens is you burn yourself out. You tank your energy. You do not become sustainable. You lose connection with value on the material plane, and oftentimes with connection with your own sense of value as well. When we look at the definition, the design of business in the chart, this is the ego circuit in traditional human design. This is a circuit that has at its heart the job of creating resources. If you look at it, you'll see that it goes in a nice little circle and then it goes up through the will center to the throat. And that's energy is all about managing, guiding, creating, cultivating, holding on to, distributing, sharing, administering resources. In quantum human design, which is the higher frequency deconditioned expression of human design, we see that the purpose of this circuit is to create sustainable resources. Sustainable being the operative word here. Circle it, underline it, make a big note, because that's a very important piece to understand. The purpose of this circuit is to create communities and tribes, although I'm not sure that's the right word, but communities and groups of people that align around the idea of sharing, contributing, aligning, and peace. War is not the highest expression of this circuitry. Fighting and fighting for your share is not the highest expression of this circuitry. At the heart of this circuitry, we see contracts and businesses that feed the masses or provide resources to the masses, and alignment with the energy of well-being. We just haven't done it yet. It's not that there's a problem with the economy, it's that we haven't actually maximized the potential of the economy yet. So the mastery of this particular circuit involves the ability to respond to the right need at the right time to create sustainable value and to share resources. The unbalanced expression of this circuit is letting fear and lack create overwhelm and the misuse of power and resources. So I want to just take a pause there for a second and say, for any of you who sent me emails concerned about my espousing the virtues of capitalism, I want you all to know that the way in which we are experiencing capitalism, if you want to call it that in our culture right now, is absolutely the shadow/unbalanced expression of the potential that we have to live in an economy that is sustaining, just, equitable, and abundant for everyone. It's designed to be for everyone. The shadow is fear and lack, overwhelm and misuse of power and resources. And as we go through the rest of this presentation, I want to unpack for you what's causing the shadow expression of this. So our lesson, and I always like talking about what's the lesson, because really the chart is the curriculum of your soul. It's just school. It's just your school curriculum, right? And right now, our curriculum is teaching us to learn to trust in enoughness, which is tricky, right? Because if you open up any news page right now online, or if you get the paper still, most people don't, but everybody's screaming, we don't have enough. Why? Why is this the conversation right now? Let's unpack that too. So keynotes for this particular circuit include right timing, resources, integrity, service, education, sharing and caring, community and support, relationships and connection, agreements and bonds. This doesn't really sound like war, hoarding, greed, destruction, all the things that we are doing right now in the shadow expression of this potential. If we take this circuit apart, it kind of has two sides. They are actually both important, but we're really, for all intents and purposes, going to be focusing on the left side of this circuit. That's the part that runs from the 54 to the 32, from the root to the spleen, from the spleen to the will, and from the will through the 2145 to the throat. The themes of this part of the circuit, if we trace it from the bottom to the top, it starts first in the 54 with divine inspiration and ambition, which, by the way, when did ambition become a bad word? What if ambition is just the endurance to be able to hold on to a dream or a vision? Unfortunately, the shadow of ambition is like, being out of integrity with how you move towards that vision. It involves transforming the patterns of the past and getting out of fear and pain because those patterns don't work anymore, transforming those patterns into something that is beautiful and is of greater value and confers power upon people. And from that, then transforms the fear and the pain into something of greater value. So the purpose of business is really, then the second theme is intuition, using sales and marketing as a way of transmitting truth and integrity. It's a way of in the shadow, overcoming lying and falsehoods, including the lies and the falsehoods that keep you stuck in patterns that cause pain and fear. It's about creating material gain in exchange for service, high integrity service. It is about money. So let's not make money the bad guy, because money is not the bad guy. It's just not the goal of business. It's about teaching. It's about history. It's about allocation and management of resources. It's about power. It's about ego, sacrifice, and service, but not martyrdom in its highest expression. Sustainability. Rest. Rest is in here. Healthy economies have rest built into them. Endurance and will. And that will is the will to do the right thing, even if in the moment it seems scary. So the root of business success, if we look at this circuitry, isn't about your education, how much capital you have access to, business techniques, plans, and strategies. You know, when I teach coaching programs, this is the part that really my clients, oftentimes my coaching students struggle with a lot, because I always start with, what's your purpose? What's your voice about? What are you here to serve? Who are you here to serve? And we don't ever start with business techniques, plans, and strategies, because those do not determine your success. If you have success with a business technique, plan, or strategy, it's just probably a fluke. It's not going to be sustainable. You have to have a good, strong connection to your heart to be successful in business in the new economy. It's not about your ability to use sales formulas. It's not about marketing. It's not about high-end clients, not about what you wear, how you look, your branding. And let me just throw in, it's also not about your niche. Okay. The highest expression of business, according to the chart, is the manifestation of divine inspiration into form. It is a deep connection to source that you cultivate by intuition and practice that is for the greater good for everyone. That involves education, creation of resources, service, transmission of truth and transformation, sustainable management of resources, and is rooted in high integrity, built through love and relationship, endures and transforms, is balanced, involves community, and is rooted in service. Not sacrifice or martyrdom. The service itself needs to be sustainable, and money is not the goal, but it's part of what's necessary to sustain your business, because it's the metric that measures the currency of the value we exchange. We don't go into business to make money. We go into business because it's alchemical, because it's a spiritual process that supports us in serving the world at our highest level. And I truly believe that those of you who feel called to nurture and take care of others as a business, or those of you who feel called to be entrepreneurs, or both, you are called to serve this world at the highest level, because transforming the world of economy and the world of value and the karma of value is the most important work we have to be doing on the planet right now. All right, let's talk about this poor guy. Look, he didn't even get a good person to paint a good portrait of him, right? Okay. So this is a portrait of Adam Smith, who wrote a book called An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations. He wrote this book on March the 9th, 1776, right before we split from 7 to 9 beings. So he was playing in this energy field of shift in consciousness, right? And thinking about materialism and positioning his thinking on the edge of this evolutionary shift that we're in the middle of now, positioning his thinking and pointing it towards the economic status of, or the economic rules of business, and also thinking about it in the context of well-being. Adam Smith thought a lot about well-being, a lot. So I'm going to roll through for those of you who have maybe lamented Adam Smith as being an evil person who is responsible for capitalism on the planet. He's not. There was just the way in which it got interpreted got kind of messy. So Adam Smith said, here's some quotations from Adam Smith, because I think we need to send some healing back to Adam Smith's story. He said, science is the great antidote to the poison of enthusiasm and superstition. Don't think too much about these. I'm leading you through a thought process here. Labor was the first price, the original purchase. We saw that in its shadow in the United States for sure. Money that was paid for all things was not by gold or silver, but labor that all wealth of the world was originally purchased. That means the purchasing of people made people commodities, not in the quantum economy anymore. No society can surely be flourishing and happy of which the far greater part of the members are poor and miserable. Okay? He definitely didn't have like an Ayn Randian take on this. He was saying we can't be happy and flourishing if parts of our people, populations in our community are poor and miserable. Okay, start sending your healing love back to Adam Smith now. A nation is not made wealthy by the childish accumulation of shiny metals, but is enriched by the economic prosperity of its people. That's a quantum thought, you guys. To feel much for others and little for ourselves, to restrain our selfishness and exercise our benevolent affections constitute the perfection of human nature and also the highest expression of the will center. And last but not least, problems worthy of attacks prove their worth by hitting back, meaning the evolution of the idea of capitalism, which is pushing back against us in a big way, doesn't mean that capitalism is the problem. It means that we are still working with figuring out the solution of how do we implement an economy that's rooted in sustainability, equity, justice, abundance, and allows everybody in our community to flourish. Because if we're not all flourishing, our economic system isn't working. So there are 5, this is a grossly simplified explanation of capitalism. I am not an economist. So if you want to go deeper and more into what exactly is capitalism, I encourage you to do so. I will not be the person who will be leading there because I have a different intention around this conversation, but certainly it's an interesting read. So 5 core principles of capitalism include private property, the ownership of property, the ability to cultivate the value in a property, to be able to increase your base for wealth, which if you know anything about the way in which the world works right now, even here in America, this is not happening. Private property is still a pretty exclusive experience. Capitalism is rooted in supply and demand, meaning you have a need, you build supply to meet the need. It is based in competition, and it gets really ugly when you weave in the whole Darwinian thing about the survival of the fittest. And of course, it's deeply rooted in the idea that there's not enough and you got to grab your fair share and you got to get there first, right? And that makes you a success in the capitalism game. It's rooted in freedom. We should not be told by anybody what to do and how we should do it in terms of making money. We're not doing that anywhere in this country, in America. And I don't think there's really anywhere else where that's happening either yet. There's a whole principle called laissez-faire in the economy of capitalism that says basically hands off, let business people do what they want to do. And I actually think that can work, but we have some other things we got to do first. And it involves incentive. And that incentive is multifaceted. But at the heart of capitalism, the incentive is when you do well in your business, everybody benefits. That's the incentive of capitalism, which again, I also think is actually a good idea, but we have to do it right. The problem here is not so much capitalism as this. We're still got training wheels on our understanding of how to work with this will center. Okay, we are pushing with will, and we have not defined value and what is valuable, including ourselves and each other. We have not defined that value in a way that builds a sustainable economy. In fact, I would argue that the reason why this economy is not sustainable is because it's being run by people who question their value and are using the economic status or the economy itself to try to prove their value to the world. All right, so here's what happens. When we get out of integrity with our self-worth, with our own value, We actually experience it in 5 core ways. So the first way, I call it prime. I'll go through these in just a second in greater detail. So the first way that we get out of integrity is we get out of physical integrity. So if you question your value, if you don't feel like you have value, if you have low self-esteem or low self-worth, one of the things that's going to tank in your life is your physical integrity. We see that the energy for your immune system, the thymus, where we make B cells and T cells, actually lives on the gate 26. When we get out of integrity with ourselves, with our value, it actually causes us to oftentimes experience a breach in our physical integrity. Our bodies no longer support our workforce energy, and we have no choice but to rest, often at a great cost to our well-being. By the way, the secret code word for this is called burnout. If you watched my TED Talk, in my TED Talk, I talked about the relationship between getting disconnected from your true sense of worth and your right place in the world. That when you have any experience in your life, any experience, event, or perception that causes you to lose connection with your value or your right place in the world, you put your body at risk for having struggles with well-being. You also fail to do the things you need to do to make sure your body stays healthy. The second thing that happens is when we struggle with self-worth, we have a breach in what I call resource integrity. Meaning we don't commit resources. We'll either commit resources we don't have. That's called debt and overspending in an attempt to prove our value to others. This is a very slippery slope. And isn't it weird if you really think about this? Your entire worth in the marketplace in the banking industry is determined by your ability to sustain debt. That's called credit worthiness. How really messed up is that when you really think about that? Don't try to think about it too hard because you won't sleep because you'll be wondering what is going on this planet. Okay. When we don't value ourselves and each other, which is a direct impact, which is a direct result of not valuing ourselves. When we don't value ourselves, we don't use our resources well. We overspend, we hoard, we fight for what we think is more than our share because we're not enough. So we have to overcompensate by creating more than enough or trying to prove our value in weird ways by buying handbags and shoes or whatever that we really can't afford because it makes us look better. The third, and of course, let me just not even talk about planetary resources, right? We don't use the planetary resources sustainably because we're afraid we won't have enough, or we aren't enough, or we have to seize power, which is a shadow expression of the will, by taking control over resources. Identity integrity. A breach in identity integrity happens when we believe that we can't make money being authentic. So we do something that's out of integrity with who we really are. And by the way, that's the fast track to burnout. And here's the thing about, let me just say this because this is so important. If you don't create sustainably, or if you want to create sustainably, and I mean down to the basics of recycling or making conscious choices, consumer choices, or building sustainably, we don't make sustainable choices if we ourselves are not sustainable because we're burned out and fried and frazzled when we're not living sustainably internally. And so we're not making thoughtful, deliberate decisions. We're just pushing the button on Grubhub because we're too tired to cook. And while, yes, you're supporting a restaurant, you're also using a whole lot of plastic and sometimes really not eating that healthfully, right? Because we can't make sustainable choices when we're tired. It takes deliberate and conscious awareness to be sustainable. It takes a practice. It takes discipline. It takes self-regulation. And when you can't live that way, it's hard to build a sustainable economy. Moral integrity is the fourth way in which we sometimes have a breach in integrity. We get a breach in moral integrity when we feel that we have to violate our values to make money. If we think, there's not enough. This is my mom with coupons, right? And the woman is she's addicted to coupons, If we think we are not enough or there isn't enough, We're going to rob, cheat, steal, sneak, break the rule, be under the table, whatever we have to do to try to get what we perceive as our fair share around our value. And last but not least, we get out of energetic integrity. A breach in energetic integrity happens when we're exhausted and burned out. And we have to work instead of rest because we can't afford to rest. Or we commit energy that we don't have in an attempt to prove our worth. This is where hustle comes in, you guys. When we're hustling, we're getting out of energetic integrity because somewhere along the way we learned our value is determined by how hard we work. And if you understand quantum physics, yeah, sometimes you got to do stuff on the material plane, but you also have to have time to kick back and be. And to balance that being with that doing, do, right? Because we also create on a maximum level, non-locally and not on the physical plane. And that's quantum physics, and that's quantum creativity, and that's the root of a quantum economy. The cure? We have to heal the collective karma of self-worth. We have to heal the collective karma of self-worth. That means each and every one of us as parts of a whole have to do our work of healing our own sense of value first, and then doing our work helping others do the same. When we have a healed sense of self-worth, when we are using this will center appropriately, when we are dropping into a deep connection with our personal enoughness, when we live from enough energetically, we embody enough. And when we embody enough, it actually creates enough because we embody a field of information, a field that is in formation, that informs the cosmos that you are living in the field of enoughness. So what you create is enough. When we create enough, we are also creating from a place of a connection to our right place and our right space. That's your healed self-worth, your unique, vital, and irreplaceable role that only you can play in the world. And it is a manifestation of not only value, but love, because the nature of the universe that you embody is love and loving. Love lives in the G center and the will center, the heart chakra. Love as a metric is infinite. Therefore, your enoughness becomes infinite, i.e. sustainable. This removes us from binary consciousness, meaning we're no longer thinking about things in contrast, this or that, but we're thinking both and more. And we are now juxtapositioning our consciousness, or rather we're removing ourselves from the juxtaposition of consciousness in lack versus abundance. When we heal the collective karma of self-worth, we also redefine abundance so that we're not overcompensating for our perceived lack of enoughness. I can't tell you how many times when I talk about the future of the human design chart and the solar plexus mutation, and I talk about how we are no longer going to be creating in the flow of abundance that we create now, people panic because we're so locked into this very aberrant definition of abundance. And I really have sort of contemplated not using that word anymore because we have a tendency to think that what we think of as abundance is actually overabundance. Our definition of abundant is actually overabundant. It usually has mixed into it a certain degree of using resources to overcompensate for your lack of self-worth. So I want to invite us into exploring the idea of abundance, redefining it as sufficiency. And that sufficiency might not sound sexy, but sufficiency is amazing. It means each and every day, when you wake up, you have enough. You don't even have to worry about it anymore. You just know you have enough. And if you have enough, you're better positioned to make sure that the people around you also have enough. And they in turn can say, hey, I have enough, I am enough, I have enough. Now I can create enough, and more and more and more enoughness gets transmitted across the face of the globe. That is actually, consciously or unconsciously, a little bit what Adam Smith talked about. So we'll keep rolling on our conversation here. When we are no longer living in lack, and we are occupying the energetic field of information of enoughness, we also naturally see the enoughness in others. The metrics of value change from money and numbers to well-being so that we can more effectively implement all the high expressions of business in the chart. And our economy then operates with integrity. So let's go back to the 5 principles of capitalism. If we are being capitalists, if you will, from the heart, with healthy sense of self-worth and a deep, powerful sense of value, you know your right place in your right space. And you are so beautifully embodying the fulfillment of the story of who you are. And you recognize that you are a unique and vital part of the cosmic plan. And hey, so is everybody else, because we're a puzzle, right? And we all have to be doing our fair share to be amplifying the magnificence and the beauty of the puzzle. When we're living and creating from that place of healed self-worth, we use private property to enhance the well-being of others, right? Or we do our best to create property that has the power to enhance the well-being of others. It becomes a paramount conversation to have collectively, that we make sure that every single living person who chooses to own a home owns a home. That's a non-negotiable. Supply and demand is then used to meet the needs of all. You see a collective need, you work and rush in with your business to fill it. Or if it's not your business's job to fill it, you take the excess of what you create in your business and you put the money there. Competition becomes the race to resolve the challenges facing humanity at the fastest rate possible, and I might even add collaboratively. Freedom. If the nature of the cosmos is to become increasingly complex, to unify and create greater states of coherence, love, and order, then we are given freedom that is rooted in a profound healed expression of our authentic integral self. Then our free expression naturally serves and represents the complexity, unity, and coherence of the cosmos. We're free to follow the flow of life's intelligence through us to create unity and coherence and greater evolved expressions of the human story. And the incentive then becomes the natural force that moves business towards creating success that enhances well-being as the new metric of success and profit. And so if you're familiar with the doctrine of Adam Smith, he talks a lot about the invisible hand, that somehow magically when businesses and people in business are fulfilling their destiny for their business, that magically everything clicks into place and we have a society where everybody has enough. I believe that that invisible hand that Adam Smith talks about is compassion. Because when you are standing in your value and you see someone who isn't, you can't help but want that for them too, to be able to lift them up, to bring them into alignment with their value. Because you understand that each and every human being, sentient being on the planet plays a unique and vital, irreplaceable role in the puzzle that is the unfolding of life's evolution and the beauty of the human story. So, one more thing that I want to add before I go through my manifesto instead of Karl Marx's manifesto, okay? In the 2027 solar plexus mutation, the chart is getting ready to change again. And part of what's happening in this shift is this channel, the 5027, connecting the sacral to the spleen, gets added to the business circuitry. So we call this the quantum business circuitry. It's actually called the material circuit. And what this addition of this channel shows is that the business side of the ego circuit, the channel adds the channel 5027, which is called the channel of sustenance. This gives us the potential for building an economy rooted in love and integrity that is driven by a desire to feed and nurture people and to amplify the quality of well-being for all. The drive towards creating well-being in businesses is going to go up, not down. Even though right now we're still looking at an old, outdated equation that says there's not enough. Business then becomes a vehicle for nurturing the world, and profit now becomes measured by how much well-being your business creates for everyone who comes into contact with it. In other words, we all do better when we all do better, to quote the late Paul Wellstone. All right, I'm going to end this with what I like to call my creative manifesto. This is my response to the abuse that stems from the current economy and what we need to do to heal it. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. So first, I just have to show you this because this manifesto is incredibly important to me because of this person. This is my oldest grandson who initiated me into a brand new understanding of the infinite nature of life and certainly kicked me into an even more passionate place of wanting the world of tomorrow to be sustainable for him and his little brother. We are on the cusp of a creative revolution that will be as transformative as the scientific revolution was hundreds of years ago. This creative revolution is fueled by need and divine imperative. We are on the cusp of a creative revolution precisely when we are facing a creativity crisis. Creatives will lead the world and build the future. Creatives know how to harness life's intelligence and how to mine it for creative solutions. You can't see the solutions or occupy the information field that is the solution if you don't embody the archetype of the solution first. In other words, you have to be a vibrational match to the solution. You literally have to be the change you want to see in the world. To create abundantly, you must first occupy the information field that is abundance. To create sustainability, you must first be sustainable, and so on. Being creative, sustainable, and abundant, etc., is our natural state. Our conditioning takes us away from this natural state. To become fundamentally creative, deliberate, you have to decondition your situationally creative response. In other words, you have to stop becoming reactive and move towards an intentional goal with clarity and deliberate action. Situational creativity, that's reacting, is in the moment. It's reactive. It's determined by your conditioning. It offers short-term solutions. It's finite. It comes from the conditioned mind. It is the result of thinking and reasoning, and it is consequently reasonable. Fundamental creativity, the end goal here, transcends our conditioning. It often arrives in epiphanies and aha. It comes from infinite source. It is imaginative and possibility-oriented. It aligns with cosmic order. It is consequently unreasonable. Sometimes we call it a miracle. Deconditioning involves rewiring the brain, recoding the epigenetic programming, and a creative practice that protects you from being reconditioned and aligns you with life's intelligence. The root of deconditioning lies in clearing the 9 core archetypes, the 9 resiliency keys. And if you want to learn more about those, you can go to my website, quantumalignmentsystem.com. And there's all kinds of videos and information about the 9 resiliency keys there. And of course, when we decondition these 9 core archetypes, we create with integrity. Those 9 resiliency keys are self-trust, empowerment, lovability, courage, authenticity, decisiveness, emotional wisdom, self-worth, and vitality. And of course, we talked about this already. When we are deconditioned, we create with integrity, meaning we're in physical integrity, resource integrity, identity integrity, moral integrity, and energetic integrity. And when we are resilient and create with integrity, we are living in a state of what I call, well, it's a Jewish word, I didn't call it this, anava, meaning we're actually being truly humble. We're occupying our right place and filling no less than or no more than our right space. When we are humble, we are living into the expression of a personal narrative that encompasses our unique, vital, and irreplaceable role in the cosmic plan. We take up no more than our right place, no less than our right space. We honor and uphold the value of our own life and consequently see and honor the value of all life. We recognize that we are part of a whole and our actions not only serve the maintenance of our own value, they simultaneously serve the greater good. When we rewrite our personal narrative to tell the true story of who we are, once in a lifetime cosmic events, we add the expansiveness and the preciousness of our own narrative to the expansiveness and the preciousness of the personal narrative of others. When we live from an authentic and aligned personal narrative, it enhances well-being, the currency of the creative revolution, on every level. Well-being is contagious. We all do better when we all do better. We all do better when we're creating well-being from a fundamentally creative state and in alignment with life's intelligence. Once we decondition and live from a narrative that's based on our unique, vital, and irreplaceable role in the cosmic plan, a narrative that is abundant, peaceful, valuable, and sustainable, we naturally begin to decondition and rewrite our collective narrative. This new narrative enables us to harness our innate creative capacity and to mine the quantum field in alignment with life's intelligence, enabling us to see and implement the solutions to the challenges facing humanity today. That allows us to build a peaceful, just, equitable, abundant, and sustainable world. So you play a vital part of this program. Your existence is a holographic embodiment of the cosmos. And you have a unique and vital and irreplaceable role to play in creating the change necessary to truly live and build a quantum economy, an economy that's rooted in the idea that you are enough, everyone is enough, because we are enough, we have enough. And from that place of enoughness, we create a creative revolution that changes the world. So you are the solution. Your well-being is essential. Your success is imperative. So I'll leave you with this. In the material era, value is quantified by numbers. The metric of the quantum era is love. Love is not quantifiable. Therefore, it is infinite. I just want to end with this. This morning I did a podcast interview with Dr. Amit Goswami, who's a quantum physicist. And one of the things that he said is, when you really understand quantum physics, we're not stuck in this story at all. It just takes enough of us to hold on to the idea that there's something else possible. And for us to keep doing this work of healing the karma of self-worth and changing and shifting our point of creation by changing our mindset and our perspectives about what we think is possible. We're not doomed by any stretch of the imagination. And in fact, if you look at the astrology of what's coming 10 years out, we're fine. We're going to be fine. But we're just in this transition point where, we're learning the last final lessons, and this is the last final thrust of this evolutionary cycle, and everything feels chaotic, but the nature of the cosmos is not chaotic. It's about unifying around complex evolutionary ideas in a coherent way. And lack and poverty and abuse of resources and abuse of people is not coherent, and it doesn't match our true nature. So we'll get there. All right. All right, you all. Thank you all so much for joining me. Thank you all for listening. I appreciate your attention and your time. And I hope that you took something away from this presentation that allows you to remember that you are a once-in-a-lifetime cosmic event, and that you have a unique and vital and irreplaceable role in the cosmic plan. And there's nobody on this planet has ever been like you before. There's never been anyone like you before. There will never be anyone like you again. That's pretty darn precious. Don't forget that. Don't forget that. All right. Bye.